Hello, we're delighted to have Chris Woollams here with us today. He's one of the founders of CANCERactive, the UK's #1 cancer prevention charity, which I'm sure you'll know. He has an encyclopaedic knowledge of cancer and cancer prevention, and his worldwide speaking tours sell out within hours of being announced. He's the author of 6 best-selling books on cancer prevention and treatment. He was one of the founders of CANCERactive back in 2001 when his daughter Catherine was diagnosed with a grade 4 malignant brain tumor, unfortunately, and was given 5 to 6 months to live. He decided to dedicate his life to saving hers. He sits on group boards in the Far East, where he now lives most of the year, and has been involved in the UK steering group on EMFs. He's also the patron of several charities seeking to protect children from toxins and EMFs, and has been called by one doctor the man who put integrative oncology on the map in the UK. So Chris, thank you very, very much for talking to us today, and please introduce anything further that I left out.
No, it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have a number of questions lined up for you. And also I'd like to mention that listeners, you can put questions into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll be getting back to Chris with them, and possibly also have the pleasure of having him back again in a few weeks. So Chris, you're a major advocate of patients taking their cancer treatment and optimal survival into their own hands. You've previously said that if patients are informed of all the choices that are open to them, no one needs to die of ignorance anymore. How did you first come about and develop your detailed personal prescriptions to patients who are based globally?
I think the answer to that is kismet, if you know what kismet is. Kismet Hardy. Fate, I think. I'm almost convinced that almost everything that's happened to me since about 2000, the year 2000, has been fate. And I don't know whether that's 100% the right word, but I did a whole speech to a lot of oncologists on the subject, because none of this was planned. I mean, let's be quite honest about it. It all happened. How did I get into PPs? Again, that was bizarre, because I wrote a book. Okay, so Catherine was probably 2 years down the line, and she'd been given 5 to 6 months. St. Thomas's had never had anybody live more than 18 months. I mean, we're going back to 2002, remember? St. Thomas's and Guy's, they were a group. And when she got through 2 years, a couple of oncologists said, would I write down what I found out? You must never say that to an ex-adman, because advertising people always have a book in there. So I started writing a book, and that was everything you need to know to help you beat cancer. And it sold 10,000 copies in a weekend. You just can't.
My goodness. Oh.
I know. It got covered by the Daily Mail and the Evening Standard, and the BBC rang me up, and LBC and so on. And I got invited over to speak at BBC show at Olympia in the morning, and then LBC in the evening. I was on a Saturday. And so I arrived in England on the Friday afternoon. So I don't know, 2003. And I walked into the office. We don't even have one now. We're virtual. And we had a new secretary, mother hen, in the place. And she suddenly went, there's a phone call for you. This is a true story, right? And I don't even know who it is. And I wish I could do the accent, because his voice said to me, he said, as you can imagine, he said, I've been sent books, articles, and magazines from all over the world, and I'm just ringing you up to tell you yours is head and shoulders above the rest. And I said, I'm really sorry, who is this? And he says, Jeffrey Boycott here. And I was a cricketer too. I was opening bat too. And so I said, what can I do for you? And he said, I got a tumour on the back of my tongue, and they're going to break my jaw. Go in, cut it out, give me chemo and radio, and they've told me I'll never talk on TV or radio again. And in fact, when we did the show, the Sunday show with him, he said he'd actually been given 3 months to live, which I didn't know till we did the Sunday show. And bottom line, I built him a program over the phone, and you know, he's with us today. And his cancer, in my humble opinion, was all about a parasite. I then get to Olympia the next morning, and a man called John Dean and his wife Gilian come up to me, and Galiana's got ovarian cancer, grade 4, stage 4, and she's got 3 months to live and been told to go and write her will. So we sat down and I worked out a plan for her. And then we got onto the show in the evening, and on the BBC, I think it was, or LBC in the evening. And Mrs. Omar rang up, and she was given a few months with her breast cancer and so on. She's now one of our regional execs. And then, I mean, the really weird one was that someone came up to me about a brain tumour. And I was on my way back to France. So I literally, and I was reminded of this about 6 months ago, because when I asked a PP patient, how did you hear about me? And she said, I think Sarah, so. I went, I know that name. And she said, yeah, you built a program for her when you were at Gatwick on the way to Nice. Well, I live in Nice. If I'm not in Thailand, I'm in Nice. So I said, how is she? And she said, oh, she's fine. She's doing well. And I said, what did she have? This is like 17, 18 years ago. She had GBM, grade 4 brain tumour.
Oh.
So literally 4 of my first, I guess 4, maybe 5 or 6 people still alive and kicking and well today. So in the end, the word gets out. So that's how I started, by pure chance.
Of course, fantastic. Thank you. Well, when you create a PPE, that's a personal prescription for a patient, you look at many different areas of their life. How much of a factor do you think toxins, for example, play in a cancer diagnosis?
Environmental toxins are a huge problem to the world, to people and cancer and so on. Okay. But in the fullness of a PP, it's just one area. So toxins actually very much depend on the cancer. I literally looked at oxygen, at vitamin D, at fasting blood sugar, cholesterol, triglycerides, gut issues, which includes toxins, stress, insulin, diet. So I've got loads of different things I look at. I call it shutting the doors. So in fact, what I try to do when I build a program is I shut all the doors so that cancer can't rush through them. And by actually making someone stronger, cancer has less of an ability to develop. And if you leave a door even slightly ajar, cancer is going to run through it and spread. So the question was about toxins. Lymphoma, multiple myeloma, leukemia are driven by toxins. And I go through it with people, and those toxins can be external. So people who work with benzene or work in printers and so on, they can have environmental toxins. Then there's the toxins you can consume, like aspartame, and even things like paracetamol might muck up your kidneys. And then finally, it's the toxins your gut bacteria produce, your bad guys produce. So there are sort of 3 different areas to toxins. Yes, 2 of them are environmental.
Okay, thank you. Of course, cancer prevention and its treatment isn't just a one-size-fits-all approach. How important is it that patients ask questions of their doctors and start putting together their own integrative methods to help beat their cancer?
There's sort of 2 questions there. How is it important, how important is it that patients ask questions to their doctor? Waste of time. Just waste of time. I wouldn't bother. And the reason there's no point in asking the doctor is because you put him on the spot. And he hasn't done these subjects. He's never learnt these subjects. So if I go into the Royal Marsden and I ask Johnston a question on the environmental toxins of breast cancer, he's going to glaze over. He's just going to say, oh, it doesn't really matter. If I ask him about vitamin D, he's going to say, oh, I wouldn't take that if I were you. It's just because he doesn't know. And I mean, I spoke to 150 oncologists about 2 years ago, and only 3 got up and walked out. I thought it was quite good, really. But they just don't know. And in advertising, we used to have account directors, and those account directors would get asked by a client a question, and they would give a dodgy answer, and I would take them outside afterwards and say, don't ever do that again. If your client asks you a question and you don't know the answer, then what you do is you actually say, I'm really sorry, I don't know the answer, but I'll tell you what, I'll find it out, and I'll come back to you on Monday and tell you the correct answer. I said, and then the client would love you to bits. The doctor hasn't got time. And I used to say to my account directors, please don't bullshit, because it's bullshit. And so you've asked the question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be honest. Doctors don't know the answer, but they openly give answers to questions they haven't got the first clue about. It is really important to build an integrative program. One of the biggest issues that, as you probably know, I've banged on about now for 20 years nearly is vitamin D. And I wrote a new blog about it because it's getting more and more confusing, because in all the scientific papers, it's measured in Ng per mil. And hospitals have this habit of saying, oh, look, you're 60, 65, you're doing so well, you mustn't take any more vitamin D. And actually they're measuring it in nanomoles per litre, which is 2.5 times higher.
Yeah.
So I've just written something that says you should be 50 Ng per mil, and that's 125. The heading of the blog was Say Out Loud 125. And would you believe the Harvard medical director has just said exactly the same figures?
Wow.
Exactly the same figures. So vitamin D is really important. Cancer metabolism is really important. Stress management we do. And then you get sort of diet and other things like that. But if the question is, how do you put to, should patients ask questions to their doctor? The answer to that is no. It's a waste of time.
Okay. You strongly believe that cancer is reversible. What's the very first thing that a patient needs to change about their diet and lifestyle from day one of their diagnosis that will start to make positive changes to their health, would you say?
You're going to think I've got it even for doctors. Actually, a lot of my best friends are oncologists. I think you've got to just change your attitude to the medical profession. I get so many people in PPs telling me what the mistakes that got made, how they were misdiagnosed and things. Just change your attitude to the medical profession. Stop thinking the doctor knows best and actually start learning for yourself what you need to do. And, there's some simple things you need to understand. Your oncologist is interested in illness. He's interested in illness. And that's why all the blood tests he takes are about your leukocytes and lymphocytes and how low they are, because he needs to give you more drugs and he doesn't want them to be too low, otherwise you can't have the drugs. I'm not interested in illness, I'm interested in wellness. I make all my patients now go for a well man or a well woman check. What's your oxygen level? What's your fasting blood sugar level? What's your cholesterol? What's your triglycerides? What's your vitamin D levels? That's what people have got to do. They've got to change, they have a step change in their attitude to their illness. And that means that the doctor is going to fit into part of my program. If I'm a patient, fit into my part of my program, but I'm going to build myself a big program and he is a part of it. So that's the most important thing, really. And, you ask what should they do? That people should very simply on diet, never mind anything, any like detailed knowledge, they should cut empty calories. They should eat soluble fiber, whole, real, nourishing foods. What happens to the word nourishment? No one talks about nourishment. So stop eating empty calories, eat nourishing whole foods, eat good fats, not bad fats, eat more colorful vegetables rather than fruits, rebuild your gut. I exercise every day, so should every cancer patient. So, it comes back to vitamin D, maybe melatonin, weight control. That's the answer.
Okay, you've written a book, of course, called The Rainbow Diet, haven't you? Can you just briefly mention what you feel about the ketogenic diet? Because that's, of course, a real go-to approach for many therapists, particularly here in the UK, I think, and also in America, based partly on Professor Thomas Seyfried's book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I spent 3.5 days of my life with Thomas Seyfried and we got on really well. Joked all the time and it was really interesting. We swapped notes and so on. And, I'm afraid I wouldn't touch it. It's an extreme in a way of the rainbow diet. So, you could argue that rainbow diet's halfway there anyway. But we talked about carbohydrates and he wants you to have 2% of your calories from carbohydrate. That's all. And so I said to him, well, what do you do with women who've got breast cancer, for example? I want them to have pulses, greens and pulses, because they're phytoestrogens and that will block nasty estradiol sitting on the receptor sites. And no answer. which really surprised me. And I said, the other thing I want my patient eating lots of soluble fiber, oats and pulses and nuts and seeds and things like this, because people who have the highest consumption of soluble fiber have the best immune systems. Because you put your gut bacteria. What do? Well, immune system, silence. Now I know what he's thinking. He's thinking it's too many calories. So I said, but I basically, most usually, I would say in 80% of cases, I use berberine. I underpin the carbohydrate consumption with berberine, 3 lots of 500 milligrams. And now he's all smiles because I said, I try and keep them below 4.5 sugar level, fasting blood sugar level. And that is exactly what he tries to do. Use the pain of no carbs to get people down to 4.5. I just think there are easier ways of doing it. And you get other benefits. You get nourishment from it. Then we got to fat. The problem with fat is too many people eat bad fats. I'm going to come back to that. Third, we got to protein. So, Thomas, let me ask you a question. You don't want me to eat animal protein because you don't want me having too much glutamine because it makes glutamate, and glutamate is an alternative fuel to glucose. Yep. I've got a problem, Thomas. I'm full of glutamine. It's in all my muscles. It's in my brain. So what are you going to do? Take it away and kill me? Is that the idea? You just cut it out completely down to 8% and then I've got no glutamine? And I said, and secondly, as every A-level biologist knows in Britain, it's a non-essential amino acid. You can't do it. If I don't have enough glutamine, I make it. To which he said, well, Chris, I admit we've still got a few flaws left to iron out in the ketogenic diet. Okay, fundamental plank. This is not a flaw, this is the Grand Canyon. So then we come back to fat. He openly admits, and we know it's true, that people use lots of bad fats. He totally agreed on my definition of good fats. Extra virgin olive oil, fish oils, oily fish, avocados, nuts and seeds. That's it, okay? Now, beyond that, it's bad fats. So I said to him, it's my last question. I said, $64,000 question. Would you eat coconut oil? Would you pour it all over your food? Would you cook with it? And he went, no, it's highly inflammatory. Well, when you picked me up from the floor, I said, that's exactly what I think. And I know, he said it's 92% saturated fat, so he wouldn't use it. But more for me, I know that when you eat coconut oil, your gut bacteria turn it into TMA, and your liver turns that into TMAO. And you look it up, it's one of the most inflammatory compounds you can have in your body. Bang. End of my view on the ketogenic diet.
Oh, okay. That's
all over the place. It might well help people for a few months. I have no doubt about that.
Thank you. Very counterintuitive, actually. That's fascinating. So the CANCERactive website is home to thousands of peer-reviewed articles that hone in on the cutting-edge breakthroughs that are being made in cancer prevention and treatment. Could you perhaps take us through a few of the most important studies that have come to light recently?
There's hardly anything recently.
Oh, really?
COVID stopped it all, I think.
Wow.
No one's publishing. We have one interesting article about how pancreatic cancer cells go around hoovering up their cholesterol, the cholesterol in the body, so they can spread. But in fact, it came from a few years ago. For me, the big ones that affect people, the American Cancer Society in 2012, I'm sorry it was 8 years ago, but no one knows about it. In 2012, they did a study on all complementary therapies, and they literally looked at all the research on all complementary therapies. And they said that diet, exercise, and weight control could increase survival time and prevent cancer recurrence. And at the same time, you had Dr. Young S. Kim, who's the lady who buys all the nutrition work for the National Cancer Institute. She was actually talking much the same way. She said there are a load of foods which actually, once you're in remission, can prevent cancer recurrence. And she then quoted, if you like, the compounds in those foods as being sulforaphanes, curcumin, piperine, vitamin E. She meant total vitamin E, not the rubbish we buy in the high street. Vitamin A, genistein, EGCG, and that, I think that was about it. And she actually went on to say that if people couldn't get the foods, they could always buy a quality supplement. This was from the National Cancer Institute, biggest government body in the world. But we've just had, about 2 years ago, a big study from the American Cancer Society again, because they have a diet and they have an exercise program very, very similar to CANCERactive's. And someone obviously said, well, it's very good in theory, but does it actually work in practice? So they took stage 3 colorectal cancer patients, and these were all people who had surgery and chemo, and they followed them for 7 years.
Wow.
Okay, 3,800 people.
Gosh.
And they showed that in that 7 years, the people who stuck most closely to the diet and most closely to the exercise program had 31% more survival, and during the 7 years, 42% less death.
Amazing.
And as I said to all the oncologists, okay, now who can tell me a drug that does that? Because I don't know one. So that's what we're getting stuff on sugar. We've got this page which is 20 links between sugar and cancer. And every time I get a good one, I drop the weakest one. We've now got, I should think, 18 of the 20 studies are top professors at top hospitals. I just don't know how anybody can deny that sugar, leukemia robs its neighbors of their sugar. Leukemia changes the ability of insulin to work in the body because it wants blood sugar to be high so it can actually drive itself. It's just ludicrous that people think that it's possible that in hospitals that sugar doesn't drive cancer. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, no, totally agree. What are the core supplements and herbs that patients need to base their integrative approach around? You've already mentioned quite a few actually, but would you say those are the main ones? I know you've talked about hinokiol as well before on your website.
Yeah, we use hinokiol if does two things. Hinokiol, it actually attacks cancer stem cells, and actually there's very good research that it attacks cancer cells anyway. It actually kills cancer cells and it restricts metastasis. So we use it, for example, when we're having chemo. We're using it for chemo. But the main core supplements, number one, got to be vitamin D. Get your vitamin D level up to 50 ng per mil. It's got to be fish oils, and with COVID around, it's got to be good old cod liver oil. And do you know, my patients, when I do my speech every year, I do a show of hands. Okay, who took their fish oil today? It's going down. It's going. It used to be at least a third of the people in the room. Now I'd say it was about 25%. B complex is very important as you age because your gut bacteria make your B vitamins, and there's very good research from Professor David Smith of Oxford about Alzheimer's, but it also applies to cancer, that homocysteine builds up before you get both diseases. And homocysteine can be minimized by taking your fish oil every day and taking B vitamins, because what happens, your gut bacteria go down as you get older, don't they? And they don't make as much B vitamins. And B vitamin on top of fish oil neutralizes homocysteine. So they're the sort of thing. Magnesium's the other thing. 40% of people in Britain are short magnesium. It's terrible.
Is hypercoagulation something that you also think is a concern? We have a lot to do at AONM with infections, and they cause a layer of fibrin on the vasculature, and hypercoagulation is something that's just such a big topic with us. Do you find that in cancer as well? Nattokinase, for example, or serrapeptase, or lumbrikinase is often advised.
Yeah, I've taken nattokinase. I'm not madly keen on serrapeptase, but nattokinase I've used. Coagulation is a big issue. And I've had 2 patients in the last year. The wife rang me up 2 days before and said, I'm sorry, he died. First round of chemo, blood clot. And we, of course, use not just fish oils, but we use high doses of turmeric, curcumin. We use berberine. And we use things like ashwagandha and so on, and almost everything we do thins the blood. Yeah. Now there's method in our madness as well, because I had a patient who was taking something like 8 grams of turmeric, and the nurse came up to him and said, "Your platelets are down. You've got to be very careful. You'll die," sort of thing. Well, yes, you can get blood too thin, but actually, I don't know whether you know, but cancer cells need platelets. they actually use platelets to form blood supplies to grow and to spread.
Right.
And there's a drug called dipriridamole, which is you can use off-label, and it has been used. I think the first studies were in about 1985 in Sutton, of all places, in the world, in Surrey, and they showed it extended, survival times. I think it was melanoma and a couple of others. But this is just by cutting the platelets in the blood. You need thin blood. You don't need thin blood in cancer to fight it.
Yeah, of course, disseminated hypercoagulation is a characteristic of COVID-19 when it's developed out of SARS-CoV-2, isn't it? Have you seen any connections between this new virus and cancer? I know you said not many articles have come out on cancer over the last 6 months, but have you noticed any correlations, or is it too early to say?
There was research done out of New York on people who had cancer, and if they got COVID, what happened to them.
Okay.
And I'll be honest with you, I cannot remember. 2 cancers, people got much, much worse, but 2 cancers, they actually improved. Mm-hmm. So it's not black and white. It's not black and white. I mean, I've extensively looked at COVID, as you know, so has Lodi. And the biggest issue with COVID is we've not been treating it properly right from the start. So whacking people onto ventilators killed them, actually.
Yeah.
And there are a number of ways in which you can actually reduce the problems with COVID. And I wrote an article which was based on research from Southeast Asia and research from Chicago. And both of them said the same thing. I did not draw any conclusions, but it was people who had vitamin D levels over 29 mg per mil actually got a cough and a sniffle, and that was it. And people below 19 were more at risk of death. Facebook took me down for misinformation. Yeah. So do I know any similarities between COVID and cancer? Yeah, they're both corrupt. The people dealing with them are corrupt.
What a disaster. Huh?
I empathize with the man called Donald Trump, I'm afraid, because hydroxychloroquine does not work on its own. It opens cells up. That's what it does. And it's an ionophore, and it allows other things to go in there. So they've shown that zinc can go in and kill the virus, but now they've shown that steroids can go in and kill the virus. It's an ionophore. So when you use hydroxychloroquine, you take a little bit every 2 weeks of preventative agent, and you can have high zinc, and you could have beyond steroids, whatever. I'm not saying you should be. But the other thing for COVID is cod liver oil, because cod liver oil is high vitamin A. And again, you probably know, but once you get north of 60, unfortunately, our thyroids all go down very, very slightly. So we need some iodine. But the old thing about you eat your beta carotenes and your body makes vitamin A out of it goes to pot after 60. So you don't make as much vitamin A from the beta carotenes. So actually, it's a really good idea to be taking vitamin A in these times. The simplest thing is cod liver oil rather than fish oil, because it's got quite high levels of vitamin A. And it actually then stabilizes and strengthens the cell membranes and makes it harder for the virus to attack. But cod liver oil, brilliant for cancer. It's anti-inflammatory and extends your telomeres.
Amazing. Thank you. That's fantastic information. Another question I have here, we're getting on to questions from patients now, because we did receive several in advance of this, because we put out to a group that you were going to be on. Parasites, how important is it to tackle parasites or protozoa that might have come up on, for example, a gut test in relation to cancer?
Right. Vital. Vital. Mm-hmm. I call it infection, because the word parasite tends to confuse people. As soon as you say the word parasite, people think 3 meter long worms. I call it infection. You can have 4 sorts of infection in your body. You can have real parasites, much easier to get than you think. So, for example, I now help people in India. You're going to laugh, I know, but I help people in India, and I've had 2 bladder bile duct cancers. And I actually said to someone after about 5 minutes, I said, "You've got a parasite." And she said, "Well, we all have." I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, we all eat the fish in the river and they've all got parasites." Okay, fine. But liver fluke is a big thing in Southeast Asia. So I've got 2 patients with bile duct cancer in Britain. I said, "Go and get tested." You know, because it doesn't just affect the liver, it affects the bile duct. So parasites. Secondly, you get bad bacteria. So you go and get food, here's the double whammy. You go and get food poisoning. It doesn't matter whether it's salmonella, listeria, or something else. Actually, in the first 24 hours of food poisoning, you've got 2 trillion, maybe 3 trillion bugs in your body. You only got 90 trillion in there in total. So you've got a massive amount of bugs. They knock out strains of good guys. And then if you don't deal with your food poisoning, which people don't, they just let it run, they get over it. You've now only got 50,000 left. 10 years later, 20 years later. Maryland Medical School has said that these things can come back out to haunt you 20 years or more later. But those strains of good guys knocked out, they look after things like E. coli and so on. So E. coli then rises in the body, linked to breast cancer, linked to prostate cancer, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, and so on. Third one is viruses. Viruses is huge. And Epstein-Barr, breast cancer, HPV, human papillomavirus. Everybody thinks that human papillomavirus is just about cervical cancer. No, it's in higher levels in prostate cancer, higher levels in colorectal cancer, higher levels in breast cancer. And then it's dear old cold sores and shingles, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and several others. So viruses are important. EBV is a driver of some of the blood and lymph cancers. But then finally it's yeast. So yeast is slightly different. Yeast, you take in on every mouthful of food you've got, and they colonize the gut, but they lay down little roots across your gut wall. And what happens then is you eat some gluten. Now, I'm not talking trending gluten intolerance, I'm just saying you eat some gluten. If you eat gluten, you turn on an enzyme called zonulin, makes the holes bigger from the roots. Now the yeast get into your bloodstream. They go around the body, they colonize. When they colonize, they're anaerobes, they reduce the oxygen in that area. They like to sit on cells and poison them because no messages can get in and out. They also like to sit on things like scar tissue. So people get breast cancer, have a nice little operation. Doctor throws away the lump, throws away the blood vessels. Well, that's the reason it can come back, because there's no oxygen in the area, but you can also get yeast there as well. So these things, they're slightly different. Yeast are they just reduce the oxygen. They set up the environment for cancer to thrive. But all the others, they make bad chemicals, they make microRNA, and the microRNA can trump your RNA. Doctors will say, well, it's too late now because you've got cancer. Tell that to Jeffrey Boycott.
Yeah. One of our partners, Dr. Armin Schwarzbach, who runs Armin Labs in Germany, he's given us presentations on the connections between Lyme and co-infections and cancer as well.
Well, Lyme disease,
particularly blood cancer, and as you know, Babesia actually lives inside red blood cells, and that can cause huge hypoxia as well.
Lyme disease is linked to brain tumours. In my opinion, brain tumours almost always got a parasite in there. And there's research from America about it as well.
Alan MacDonald, I think, he's actually investigated them using his microscopy techniques and has found them in there and in the cerebrospinal fluid as well. So going on with the questions we've received from patients, I'll just read one from Southampton. Dear Chris, I'm getting very confused about whether to eat sugar or not. I've just been through 6 months of chemo and radiotherapy and have lost a lot of weight in the process. The hospital dietitian tells me to eat foods containing sugar to help me regain weight. But on your website, you say that cancer feeds sugar. Please, can you help me through this labyrinth?
There's sugar and there's sugar. And I think the real issue, there's carbohydrates. And if you have whole carbohydrates, as like the soluble ones I was talking about, you nourish yourself, you release the carbohydrates slowly, and you have no reason to have a sugar rush, you have no reason to have an insulin rush, and so on. We know governments are now cottoning on. We know that, you know, Kellogg's cornflakes with sugar plasters all over it. We know that cans of Coca-Cola with 10.9 grams of sugar in them are not wise to take anyway in your life. And so they certainly wouldn't be wise to have if you had cancer. And so it's obvious. I call it empty calories. Americans get their empty calories as follows. They get 30% from fizzy soft drinks, 20% from beer and other alcohols. They get 13% from puddings, 8% from bought fruit juice and smoothies, 6% from ice cream, 4% from cake, and 2% from each of biscuits, mass market chocolate, and mass market honey. You want to beat cancer, forget all of those. Nourish yourself. Get on with whole carbohydrates. Now, just remember, if you're losing weight, that a gram of olive oil is 4 times the calories of a gram of carbohydrate. So on a rainbow diet, there's absolutely no reason to lose weight at all, because apart from soluble fiber, you can have whole organic brown rice. You could even have a little jacket potato if you wanted to, but you just up the olive oil and the fish oils and oily fish content. And I wish I lost weight on the rainbow diet. So there's no reason to be losing weight. There's this myth about the word sugar. I wouldn't even talk about sugar if I were you. I wouldn't let a nurse talk to me about sugar. They don't understand what it is.
Thank you. Another patient here says he's been treated. Sorry, I missed that last sentence.
Sorry, start again. Sorry. I was just saying I'm very rude today. I don't mean to be rude.
Another patient here writes, I've been treated for prostate cancer and picked up an infection. My doctors want me to take antibiotics, but I'm worried they could contribute to the cancer coming back again. If I do give in and accept the antibiotics, should I take a probiotic at the same time? Okay.
There's kind of 2 questions there, aren't there? What's the alternative to antibiotics? Actually, there are a number of alternatives to antibiotics. You can take. I went to the dentist. I had to have a tooth completely rebuilt because I bitten something and smashed a tooth. And when I got up in the morning, the surgery rang me up and they said, "Have you taken the antibiotics yet?" And I went, "You haven't sent me any, but don't worry, I wouldn't take them anyway." And when I got round there, the guy from Barts was about to do the operation. He said, it was a lovely story. He said to me, he said, "You do understand," he said, "you haven't been taking antibiotics. You do understand that when I cut," he said, "70% of people get an infection even with the antibiotics." And I said, "Well, it's bloody pointless saying the antibiotics then." and he was, he's a lovely guy. He's about 40 years old. I took around a copy of the Rainbow Diet and I said to him, "There you are, read that." And I said, "I'll be all right. Please trust me, I'll be all right." 6 months later, when I go back to have the tooth screwed on, he said, "You have ruined my life." So I said, "Really? Why?" And he said, "My wife's read the Rainbow Diet and she says I can't practice being a doctor anymore unless I read it. So I'm going on holiday next week and I promised to read it." And then he said, "All right, what did you do? Did you get an infection?" I said, "No. I took Paldarco, I took a probiotic, and I broke it open on the cut." I said, "And I took garlic pills." And he went, "Yes, we'll get on with the operation now, shall we?" There's loads of things you can take rather than antibiotics. You just need to go. I mean, I've got a whole article on the Chris Woollams, Health Watch site, for example. But the question, the second part, should I take a probiotic at the same time? No, probably wasting your money. If you're taking antibiotics, get some apple cider vinegar. Just take a tablespoon of that a day. Okay. If you can take the antibiotics, there's not much you can do. Just you have to weather the storm. But I will say this: there is very, very clear research that 5 days of antibiotics renders some strains of some species extinct. You never get them back. Doctors don't even know that.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Thank you. One other patient here says, "What's the best vitamin or supplement I can take to prevent COVID-19? I'm a former cancer patient, currently in remission from bowel cancer. I've been on the shielded list, and I'm very worried about catching the virus."
Well, I'm going to bore everybody. Vitamin D. I mean, you've got to be taking 5,000 internationals of units of vitamin D. If you haven't been in the sun for more than 6 months, if you haven't taken vitamin D before, for goodness sake, take 10,000 international units for the next 2 or 3 months. You need to get your levels up fast. Secondly, COVID, zinc. You got to be careful of zinc, especially if you mention the word prostate cancer, because zinc too high a level can be bad as well as too low a level. So I don't want prostate cancer, so I take something like 25 milligrams 3 times a week. But zinc is very important. Then, of course, it's cod liver oil for the reasons I said before, because the vitamin A in it strengthens your membranes. And then finally, I would take vitamin C. Now, here's the rub. There is something called liposomal vitamin C. Why do you think there's liposomal vitamin C? I'm not going to really ask you. The answer is there's liposomal vitamin C and vitamin E and curcumin whenever it's a large molecule, because it doesn't get across the gut wall easily. So, in fact, the best thing to do when you're taking your vitamin C is to take it with olive oil, because it's a real problem for people with cancer. Actually, they have low levels of vitamin C in about 40–50% of cases. And when you start giving people 4–10 grams of vitamin C, it still doesn't put their levels up. One of the reasons is they just swallow the pill. You need olive oil with it. If you don't, just like curcumin or lycopene or vitamin E, you're only getting 7 cents on every dollar. You're only getting 7% of it going into the bloodstream. So that's the first mistake. But there is another bigger issue. Why don't people absorb vitamin C when they've got cancer? It's a very, real hard one. And there's a guy called Neil Riordan in Arizona, who's the kind of intravenous vitamin C king, who's shown this, and he's very worried about it himself. So there you go, vitamin D, zinc, cod liver oil, and vitamin C plus oil.
But you were saying why people don't absorb vitamin C. Is that because of the gut issue and the fact that it's not liposomalized, or are there other factors involved in that too?
There's definitely another factor which no one seems to have cracked yet. But at its basic level, if you're going to take vitamin C, for goodness sake, take it with oil, because otherwise you're wasting 93 pence in every pound.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. This is a connected question, actually. When people are on chemotherapy, they're so often told by their oncologists not to take any supplements. And that can sometimes be months. What's your approach to that? And I'm sure there's very good literature out there to back it up as well that we could perhaps link to under your interview.
Right, this is really naughty, what I'm going to say.
It's a big one, I know.
If one of my patients says, my doctor won't let anybody take supplements while I'm having the chemo, I say, would you please go and say to him, Chris Woollams would like to see his research because we'd like to print it on the website. Because you know, and I know, there's none. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, it started for me a few years back. I mean, Ralph Moss has done work on this and so on. But it started for me. I had a lady and I got a bit irritated by the fact she wasn't being allowed her curcumin. It took me less than 20 minutes to find 7 studies that curcumin made chemo work better. Yep. It damaged it. Number 2, we have very clear research from Sloan Kettering and the National Cancer Institute on melatonin. And that's always my little joke, which is if they say, we don't want you having antioxidants while you're having your chemo, the answer to that to your oncologist is, oh, so you don't want me going to sleep? Because melatonin is the biggest antioxidant we make, and it works like a rocket. It really quenches free radicals. And, you know, melatonin is a really important antioxidant. Now, as you probably know, just another little thing, melatonin, if you go to the doctor and say, can I have some melatonin? He'll say, it's the sleeping drug, and I've got much better drugs than that. Do you know there's no evidence that melatonin is the sleeping drug? Okay, that's the first point. I did a lecture with Professor Russell Rita in America, and he's a melatonin king from UCLA. And melatonin is actually the biggest antioxidant we make as animals. It is very, 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 very anti-inflammatory. You add those two together, it's the healing drug. That's what it is. When you go to sleep, you make this to heal your body, which is why when people get insomnia, it's really bad news. Okay, it's the healing drug. Now, it does regulate estrogen and growth hormone, and also it's got 5 actions against cancer cells. So melatonin, the big antioxidant, and Sloan Kettering and whatever have done research on how you should use it with chemo. And Russell Rita himself, he said everybody who's got cancer should take melatonin, especially people who are on chemo.
At what sorts of levels would you say? Because as you know, it's banned in the UK, apart from Circadin, which is the NHS one, and I think that's recommended at sort of 1.5 milligrams a day just for sleep. So it's a difficult one. But here we're doing an international webinar, so it's perfectly permissible. I mean, it's across the counter in the US.
In America and Canada, so across the cancer in Canada as well. In America, the research is very clear, it's 20 milligrams.
Okay. And
all my patients in America and Canada take 20 milligrams, and that was without me telling them. And that's what Sloan Kettering say, that's what the National Cancer Institute say. Russell Reiter's interesting because he agreed that was the level, 20 milligrams. And, but there is a doctor on YouTube going on about high dose melatonin. And yes, it's great in theory, and he quotes Russell Reiter. And people are taking 3 lots of 60 milligrams during the day and not going to sleep because it's not the sleeping drug. And but there's no research yet whatsoever on it, none whatsoever. The final one we've got Neil Riordan's done the study. Intravenous vitamin C, you can have it while you're having your chemo. It makes the chemo work better. So there you go. That's the antioxidant that all doctors despise, vitamin C, and it makes their chemo work better. They get some very funny ideas. I know you didn't ask about immunotherapy. I don't like to do lots of things when people are having immunotherapy. There's very clear research, though, that people who eat the highest levels of soluble fiber get better results from their immunotherapy. People who take a probiotic get better results from their immunotherapy. Why? Puts the T cells up. And immunotherapy needs T cells. And then it works better. And they don't tell you.
Wow, no, I think we do need to make a group of those kinds of articles. I mean, they're generally done on the individual ingredients, aren't they? But there are a few, aren't there, out there just giving evidence of a multi-nutrient diet, including supplements that really can be taken alongside chemotherapy and it having beneficial effects, as you've just described.
Yeah, there are many more. I mean, why would vitamin D or why would fish oils get in the way of, chemo and things like this? It's a nonsense. Just, most hospitals have got a pharmacist in now in Britain to put a wall between the patient and the doctor. Just ask for the evidence. Can I see the research, please? Because there's this guy in England who's a madman who'd like to actually see it. And if it's right, I'll put it up there. I'll put it on the website.
Yeah. Thank you. That's brilliant. Another one here. This is more general. It's not specifically about cancer. I want to build up a stronger immune system after a lifetime of generally feeling unwell. Where do I start? I feel a bit daunted as there are so many supplements and different types of therapies available. Please advise.
I'm going to tell you something. The simplest thing the place to start is to understand the immune system. Now, before doing a show on COVID myself about 2 months ago, knowing what I knew, I went to Google and I went to the top 6 articles on Google on the immune system, and they all got it wrong. Unbelievable. Your immune system, you have the innate system. It's what you're born with. It kind of works. It's the first line of defense, okay? And if it gets something it can't deal with, dendritic cells and things like that, hand it over to the adaptive system. And the adaptive system's got T cells, which kind of look at the things attacking. It's got B cells that kind of modify it all. And they make the antibodies that come back to attack. Okay, so I've just told you. Where would I start? I'd start by taking a probiotic. I would actually start by eating probiotic foods, not just whole soluble fiber. Excuse me, but some apple cider vinegar, maybe some sauerkraut, some unpasteurized cheese, which is in Waitrose and Sainsbury's nowadays, and some real kefir. The brand I like is Chuckling Goat in Britain because it's got loads of lactobacillus. So that's where I would start. Now, why am I saying this? Because of COVID. We learnt in COVID. It was very clear what happened in COVID. So actually, what was it? 98-point-something% of the people dying from COVID have got metabolic syndrome. So they've got high blood pressure or high blood sugars or bad cholesterol or whatever. They've got 3 of 5 criteria. But the bottom line, obesity is another one. The bottom line is they didn't look after themselves. And because they didn't look after themselves, they didn't look after this. And this is what stimulates the levels of T cells and the levels of B cells, which then go to make the antibodies. So what was happening in COVID was COVID would come on board and the T cells and B cells would work and make antibodies that went to attack. And the antibodies were useless because they just weren't strong enough. There weren't enough of them. So the body puts out cytokines, and the cytokines boost the antibodies, the B cells and T cells and the antibodies to attack. Now, vitamin D is also a key player in T cells, B cells and antibodies, okay? So people didn't have enough of that either. What happens is they still can't attack. So the body makes more cytokines, puts them up a little bit. Cytokines are like petrol. Okay, so they put them up a little bit to attack COVID. Fails. You make more cytokines, the person dies of a cytokine storm. That's what was happening. Now, if you'd had a strong gut in the first place, and you ate things like olive oil and fish oils, which make bugs that make anti-inflammatory molecules, or you ate lots of berries and things like this, not just soluble fiber, you would put up the good guys, pectins, inulins, and so on. You put it, it's all on my Chris Woollams Health Watch site, which is actually, funny enough, based in Arizona. You talk about America. So that's where I would start, because you start taking vitamin C, you start taking echinacea, or a supplement that boosts the immune system, or a herb, you will put your white cells up. No question about it. You will put them up. But you've got to take it every day. Because if you don't take it every day, it all falls back again. You need this building underneath to keep it going strong. So you need to build it, and then I don't mind if people are building it, you can take some echinacea, herbs like astragalus and so on, vitamin C, vitamin E, things like that. I have no problem. But you need to do this. Otherwise, you're just relying on the supplements to turn you around.
Yeah, I remember you've said something very fascinating, which is that insulin turns on COX-2, which is strongly inflammatory. And therefore, for some people anyway, it can be useful to just eat small meals more frequently rather than just 2 large meals. Is that a generalist statement you'd make, or does it vary by patient?
It varies by patient, but you're absolutely right. You see, you live in a country dominated by cancer research, and cancer research is adamant that stress has got nothing to do with cancer. They're mad. I can prove it 5 ways, biochemically, yeah, as a scientist, okay? Now, one thing that bad bacteria do, and also other things do, is turn on COX-2. COX-2 is an enzyme in every cell of your body. And COX-2 makes about 130 cosinoids. And the cosinoids are highly inflammatory hormones. A guy called John Vane won a Nobel Prize in knighthood for discovering all this in 1982. He told the world. Wow. And he said 3 things turn on COX-2. Steroids, which they give you when you have your drugs. Number 2, insulin. So be careful how you eat. Do not come home from work and have that big meal, because you'll get an insulin rush, turns on COX-2, makes you inflamed all over the body. But the third one, I'm sorry, are you listening, cancer research, is stress. You get stressed. You turn on your adrenals make cortisol and adrenaline, and these turn on COX-2. Now, why do we do stress management? 2 reasons. Number 1, if you turn on COX-2 with stress, you get inflamed all over your body. Cancer sees this. It knows about this. So it goes and kicks your adrenals. And you make more cortisol and more adrenaline. And you don't realize it because it's bypassed your brain. So now you're actually, cancer is driving itself around the body like it does with fat. Cancer can help you build your blood fats. So there's several ways cancer can take control of your body. This is one of them. And through stress, it drives COX-2. Now, the experts on this, the second reason, are UCLA. They have a stress management laboratory. It specializes in cancer. They've been doing it for 18 years. And they talk about what neutralizes cortisol. Answer: endorphins, happy hormones. What neutralizes adrenaline, opioids. So endorphins, exercise, yoga, opioids, prayer, meditation. Okay, they neutralize, they bring the levels down, and that stops inflammation in the body through COX-2. And it's really, really important, inflammation in the body, because, I mean, some women, for example, with breast cancer, are given the C-reactive protein score. I've got patients, it's just non-existent. I mean, it's supposed to be below 5, but it's just non-existent, because this is what we do. We manage this. And just to finish it, UCLA have actually said that people who actively manage their stress survive significantly longer. And they also said this is the most neglected area of cancer treatment. Well, it would be, because there are people in the world, did you know, saying stress has got nothing to do with cancer. Now, what they say is, first of all, counselling. Well, I think there are other things. We had Fiona Shikila-Burns on talking about EFT and how the mind can heal you. Secondly, they said there were 4 things that could reduce your stress hormones. Number 1, colourful Mediterranean diet. I rest my case. Shall I stop there? Number 2, fish oils. Number 3, yoga. And number 4, meditation. Very Los Angeles, I think, but you get the point of all this. You need to manage your stress, because stress causes inflammation, and then cancer makes it worse.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, I remember you saying that you've got 4 to 5 oncologists on your board, which is amazing. And you'll be expanding that all the time, I'm sure. Are any of them from UCLA?
No, we have a little problem, I'll be honest with you. And that is, we survive on about 110,000 a year. And people can't believe it. So I went in to see Macmillan, and they thought our magazine, 2 a year, this is a few years ago, probably cost us £1 million a year. Oh. And they just don't know, they don't understand the favours I call in from friends. Oh. Oh. And I think there's no doubt we should be, in my opinion, the kind of leaders in integrative oncology in Britain. Yeah. And I really can't say, but I've got 2 plans afoot. But then, you know, even when I was in advertising, I thought big. And I've got 2 plans afoot, and that's really, I want to go somewhere big over the next 24 months. I'm 71. You can't have me forever.
No, I don't believe it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so, so much. That was absolutely extraordinary. And I know that we'll have a lot of questions, and also be getting further questions in from our many, many listeners. So I'd like to, if it's okay with you, have you back in a few weeks' time, and perhaps hear a little bit more about those plans. They're too stunning to kind of keep totally secret. So maybe you can give us a few little pointers, and we can help you on them.
Well, it would be wonderful if you could. Britain is crying out for a centre of excellence, and I'm fed up with people.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
To get on and do it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's put our minds together on that one to the extent we can provide a tiny little bit of assistance. So thank you so, so much. That was absolutely stunning information. I just want to mention, because you talked so much about the gut there, that Chris has also written a book called Healing the Gut. So do look up his many books, and of course his website. We'll be putting all the links underneath his talk. And thank you very, very much indeed, Chris, for all that fantastic information.
It's my pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.